people with emergency funds tend to not have emergencies. And it's a weird thing, but when you have that fund in place, next thing you know, when the car breaks down, the furnace breaks down, you're not, even though they might feel like emergencies, you're not calling them emergencies anymore because you've got the money there to be able to pay for those bills.
Welcome to the Your Life, Your Money podcast with Scott Searens, teaching you how to thrive in life, wealth, and retirement.
Welcome into Your Life, Your Money. I'm Ben George. Scott Searens, he is a president and financial advisor at Searens Financial Group. Scott, what's going on? How are you?
Hey, Ben, things are good. Things are good. Thank you very much. Ben, I actually had an interesting question from a client as we were talking over the phone, and he was talking about a commercial he watched, and I don't know why it clicked to me, and I had this question for you. Do you watch a whole lot of commercials anymore when it comes to TV? When he said that, I go, wow, I guess I really fast forward through those now. I guess I don't watch a whole lot of TV, and what I do watch is typically recorded, so I'm fast forwarding through it, or I kind of space out during the commercials. How about you?
Yeah, I think exactly the same. There's a couple of different things. There's, if I'm watching live TV, if I'm watching a game or something, I'm either going to flip to something else because there's other sports on or something else I want to watch, or I'll probably just pull up my phone and either see what people are saying about the game or just kind of get lost into something else on my phone. There's so many outlets there that, I just kind of tune out. And the same thing with like a recorded show. Most of the stuff I watch is like streaming, so it doesn't even have commercials a lot of time, except maybe at the beginning, like a little pre-roll or post-roll, and I might sit through the pre-roll potentially. But the way advertisers have to reach people now, it's completely different. You can't, the video is still a big spot for people, but the way we consume it's so much different.
Yeah, I think he just caught me off guard at first because I was like, I'm with you, Ben. I'll tune out during the commercials, but what he was asking about, there was an ad about, should we, I'm sure it was a very emotional ad, and the question then came like, hey, I saw these ads. Should I be buying gold? Should I be buying silver, because of what I saw in these ads? And I guess what it made me realize too, and I thought it would be kind of just a good conversation here is, with Hulu and Netflix and YouTube TV, all of these companies now have ways to really target people based upon their age, their location, and so I thought it was really interesting, right? So I'm certain, first off, this person's probably getting targeted with the ad either based upon, using one of those services or that channel that they're watching. But then I think it's also interesting to remember what a commercial is, right? And a commercial is an ad that is, trying to drive emotion to get you to buy some sort of product. And while you might think as they're driving that emotion, right, like, oh, hey, if you don't do this, this could happen in your life, is it really best for you, or are they just the ones trying to make money for their company? And so I was so happy that this client at least reached out and said, hey, I saw this ad. Does this make sense? Should I be doing this? And we kind of talked about the overall financial plan and that long-term thought process, long-term approach. But it just, I thought it was kind of interesting. First, it made me realize I tune out during a lot of that. But then also just, the factors of how these ads are trying to drive emotion to get us to do things that might not necessarily be right for our plan.
Yeah, and if he probably got online and searched for gold and silver, then they're delivered a whole new set of ads telling them how important it is to buy it. So it just kind of reinforces that thought they once had. So it can be pretty effective. To the point of the client, is it a good idea right now to be buying gold and silver?
I believe you have to kind of look at, it's good to be diversified in your plan, but I think to go and try to make a big purchase right now because of inflation or because of what we, see happening in the economy, I think really they're just trying to drive emotion to make people make big purchases. From a long-term standpoint, gold is, really, and gold and silver have really never performed over the long-term standpoint, but it doesn't hurt to have, I'll say, a little bit of it potentially in your portfolio. But to go out and make huge purchases in my opinion, my personal opinion, that doesn't make sense for a long-term financial plan.
Very interesting. Well, if you have questions about that, you can always get in touch with Scott after the podcast. Just go to lifemoneyshow.com. That is our website. We're going to put this show up, and you'll find all of our other shows there as well, plus other video content and other resources that Scott puts together. It's kind of a hub for everything Scott does to help educate clients and people that are just looking to learn more about the financial space. Today's conversation, though, Scott, what we really want to dive into today is whether or not your financial plan is out of tune. You think about it really much like other aspects of your life, right? Getting an oil change to manage your car or getting a checkup from the doctor. If you're not doing this stuff regularly, you could have some little issues turn into bigger issues, and then, they get harder and harder to correct over time, right? So that's kind of the same idea with financial planning.
I agree. What got you to today might not be right for your tomorrow. And you had a couple great analogies there of just it's so important to be doing reviews. How often should the reviews be? Well, I mean, just on an overall financial plan, I'm sitting down with each of my clients a couple times a year to make sure that different parts of their plan are in tune. But I think we've got a lot of great topics here today to say, even beyond just those typical meetings that should be taking place, what are some other good times to be reviewing these topics to make sure that, hey, if something has changed, you want to make sure that you get everything back in tune, right on that right track for the future.
Yeah, very good. So we're going to go through 4 errors, actually, where people actually get out of tune many times in their financial plan. So we want to kind of make you aware of those, and then talk about ways in which you can kind of get back on track and how Scott helps his clients at Searns Financial Group. So first one, Scott, let's talk taxes. Taxes are a big topic of conversation. We're recording this towards the end of the year, which makes it a little more at the forefront. But your future tax considerations, if you aren't looking at these things very closely and really kind of paying attention to where you're putting your money, I can imagine over time, all of a sudden you have a tax bill that you were never expecting.
You bring up a great point there, Ben. If you're not paying attention to where you're putting your money, and I think sometimes, we get caught up into, back to hear what we hear on TV and commercials or just in the space of media, right? We get caught up into, hey, you should put all of your money into your 401k. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Saving money for retirement is a really, really good thing. What I've found, though, is in some scenarios, some people can put so much money into their 401ks that next thing you know, they've got a lot saved up, which is great. But then in retirement, you've got these required minimum distributions, the forced distributions that the government's making you take out of these accounts. And that percentage grows over time. And based on how much you save up, next thing you know, your income or your tax bill in your retirement could be just as much as it is today as it would be in the future, or it could actually potentially be more. So it's always looking at, I guess as we're going through that, call it the accumulation phase, it's looking at where you're putting your money. So maybe you want to start off, in your younger years with a Roth, right? Maybe you're in your lower tax rate years, so you're starting off with that Roth. Again, that's putting money aside, paying tax on it today, so that way it grows tax-free. You can withdraw it tax-free. Plus all the gains, you can withdraw tax-free in your future. But then let's just say you have a huge jump in income, right? Something changes. And again, this is like your financial life getting out of tune a little bit. Well, then maybe it makes more sense for you to switch over to the traditional 401k, where you get that tax deduction today, but then you will have to pay the tax on that money in the future. I'll tell you what, this is one of those things that's really tough to balance. And then outside of that, you've got brokerage accounts. So instead of using the retirement accounts, using a brokerage account where you pay, if you focus properly, you could have long-term gains versus short-term gains. So you could have long-term gains, which are more favorable than the ordinary income tax rates. I threw a lot of stuff out there, Ben, but I think it comes back to your point is continuously reviewing which tax bucket you're putting your money into. Is it going to the taxable bucket, which could be a brokerage account? Is it going into the IRA 401k bucket? Or is it going into the Roth IRA bucket? And continuously watching that, meaning where is it going into, based on the income that you have coming in today, as well as are you projecting your future income and your retirement income to be. So I think a few good times to fine tune I'll say the tax portion of your financial life would be, one is always running a future tax projection. Where do you see your future taxable income being? And then coming back to reevaluate which bucket you're putting your money into. I think this is something that you should be reviewing annually. And then also, outside of those annual reviews, if Congress comes out with new tax laws change, that's always a great time to review your plan, get things back in tune to try to, again, keep more money in your pocket versus giving it to the IRS.
The other thing I was thinking about too is when you're really kind of looking at your taxes over the long term is just kind of staying up to date on tax codes too, right? That's changing so often, and we expect it to change even more, that what you're doing today might not make sense in a year.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems every time we get a new administration or, new people in Congress, they're constantly looking at, hey, what can we do to change things around? And with that change usually comes changes in the tax law. And we might think, they just passed a bill on whatever, right? Even though it might just say infrastructure on the bill, a lot of the times within those bills, they can bury new tax laws and different tax law changes. So it's constantly just being up to date on what Congress is doing, those tax law changes, any sort of codes. I know, typically towards the end of the year, they'll come out with what the new limits will be for the future year. So understanding what those limits are, maybe you can increase your contributions to different accounts, whether it be your Roth, your 401k, or your IRA. So as you mentioned, keeping up to date on all the different tax information, it's a lot, but it could definitely provide a lot of benefit to your future.
All right, as we talk about some areas where you need to keep your financial plan in tune, what about life insurance? A place where things get out of tune is if you don't have the right amount. But I'm curious, I want you to help me understand, how does it get out of tune? How does your life insurance needs change over time?
So I think it's first important that we just kind of talk about the basics of life insurance. What is it there for? So in the event that something happens to you, your income would be lost to the people that depend on you. So life insurance is, to help provide for those people that depend on you so that they could continue to maintain their lifestyle, pay off any debts, if you had kids, to help them get through college. And so if you're underinsured, right, you could be leaving your significant other or your children struggling as they continue through life. And I think to tackle this one of when things can get out of tune, I'm going to actually kind of turn it around. We're going to talk about when you should be fine-tuning or reviewing your life insurance to make sure that you are on track.
Okay.
And I think you can look at that, Ben, based on stages of life or different life events. So let's just say you go from, being a single person to a couple to being married, right? I think that's the first time when, next thing you know, you could be out of tune. Because when you're single, if you don't have any dependents, you really don't need any life insurance, right? There's nobody depending on your income. But now if you're married, you've got a spouse. Maybe you've, picked up a larger home. Maybe you've got a mortgage. Maybe you've got, some other debts just from getting started in life together. So now you've got somebody that's dependent on your income. So I think that's the first time to really take a look at things and go, hey, is our life insurance still in tune with our needs and with our overall picture? After that, I would say the next life event would be if you have kids, right? So when you got married, the first kind of in tune would be, okay, if you've got a mortgage, helping your spouse cover that mortgage if something were to happen to you. Once you have kids, I think then it's not only helping your spouse with that mortgage, but then if something were to happen to you, then being able to help your children cover the cost of education. The other thing I think sometimes people lose track of is let's just say one spouse is, at home taking care of the children, the other spouse is working. A lot of times people just focus on life insurance on the spouse that's working to replace their income. But you really need to think about also protecting or having life insurance on the spouse that's staying at home, because what they're doing is providing a lot of financial benefits to the overall household as well, right? I mean, childcare is really expensive, and they're taking
Right.
care of all of that childcare. So what if something were to happen to them? Would you be able to continue to work? And then how would you pay for that childcare? Would you need somebody full time? And so I think it's really important to just, take a look at all aspects of life, make sure that you got everything in tune based on different stages or events that you've hit in life. Then the last would be retirement. And to me, this is where I find that I'll say maybe not necessarily people are out of tune, but they might have excess amounts of life insurance.
Okay.
Meaning, have you ever become just kind of emotionally attached to something, Ben?
Yeah, of course.
Right? We all have. And I find that, people over time have just, paid into their life insurance policy, and then they get into retirement and they just still have it until they sit down and we're going through a review and you ask the question, go, okay, you've made it to retirement. If you had children, right, all of your children are graduated, they're out on their own, they're doing just fine. What's the purpose of this life insurance? And a lot of people just, kind of sit there for a second and give you that look to go, that's a great question. I don't know. And, I think part of it is they hadn't focused on it. The other part is sometimes there's this emotional attachment to, well, I've paid into it for, the last 20, 30 years. Gosh, I don't know if I should get rid of it now. But, sometimes doing that review on that life insurance, there might be cash value that's built up that they could actually use today. They could save on those premiums. And what I see a lot of times that should take place is saving on those premiums of life insurance and transitioning over in retirement to long-term care insurance.
Okay.
But anyway, I think just, kind of walking through those different stages of life were areas that you should be thinking about life insurance and when to fine-tune your plan.
Yeah, your needs will change through life. There's no questions. That makes a lot of sense. All right, let's look at one that I think is very important right now, especially with inflation kind of where it is. But how much cash do you have in the bank? Do you have the right amount of cash in the bank? And, this could also be a needs-based, I'm assuming, right, based on what you need throughout life, but also just is your cash getting the return? I think there's a lot you can discuss in this area, right?
Boy, I tell you what, you're right, because, with inflation right now, you get too much cash in the bank, and, interest rates are nothing, right? You look at it and laugh and go, oh, man, that money's not doing anything for me. And this is a point where I think, it constantly gets debated, but there's some good rules of thumb. And I think it's good to review this on an annual basis. First, the rules of thumb, how much cash in the bank. There's the rules out there of, 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved up, having that in, whether you call it your rainy day fund, emergency fund, reserve fund, whole lot of different names for it. But let's just say we want at least, 3 to 6 months of expenses in the bank. And some thoughts of when to fine tune this. Well, let's just say you're really comfortable at your job. You feel like, hey, things are going great. I don't see any twists or turns coming. I think I'll be here for quite a while, and the business continues to grow. I don't see any layoffs in the future. Well, then maybe you have that ability to reduce it to that 3-month emergency fund, right? Because you're comfortable where you're at. You might not need those extra funds available to, in the event something were to happen to your work. So put those funds to work for you, in the market or however you wish to invest them. But maybe a good time to think about fine-tuning this is if you feel uncomfortable at work or you don't like your job and you think that you might, quit to go somewhere else or to start looking for a new job, or your company's going through layoffs, then it might be a good time to start building up those cash reserves a little bit more, so that way if something happened, right, you're like, okay, hey, I've got 6 months of living expenses saved up. to go out and to get a new job. And then, I'll take it one on top of that. I think that the world of entrepreneurs continues to grow. And so if you're, looking to go out on your own, then it might be helpful to have, maybe a year in reserves in the bank, right? So that way you've got this comfort, this peace of mind, knowing, that you've got money there to live your lifestyle as you go out and take on those new opportunities. One interesting thing, I think, Ben, is I've found that, people with emergency funds tend to not have emergencies. And it's a weird thing, but, when you have that fund in place, next thing you know, when the car breaks down, the furnace breaks down, you're not, even though they might feel like emergencies, you're not calling them emergencies anymore because you've got the money there to be able to pay for those bills.
That makes sense.
But when you don't have the money there and you're stressed out, now you're going to call all those things emergencies, and then they continue to build up, right? It's what is that, Murphy's Law? When Murphy keeps, when Murphy comes knocking, it seems like he doesn't go away.
Yeah.
A lot of times people say, hey, how much cash built up? I know we just gave some rules of thumbs, but I think this is a real emotional thing. There's no right or wrong. I've got some people that go really strict off the 3 or 6 month, criteria. And then I've got some folks that say, hey, what makes me feel safe is $50,000, $100,000. I mean, you can get too much. That's for sure, because interest rates are nothing. But hey, sometimes too, it's what gives you peace of mind.
Yeah, there's no question that.
So I think, just to kind of recap on this one, when's the best time to fine tune? I think it's a good time, annually figuring out a date on your calendar, looking at your reserves on an annual basis is a good thing to do. If you have any major change in expenses, right? So if like all of a sudden your expenses went up, your 3-month emergency fund might have just dropped to 2 months. So you might need to build it up if your expenses went up. Or if there's a change in your work environment, I think that's a good time to review it as well.
Very good. Well, Scott, I got one more on the list I want to discuss with you, Scott, about keeping in tune financially. It's the amount of risk. Do you have the right amount of risk in your portfolio? And I think this kind of plays on a lot of what we discussed already, but how often are you fine-tuning this area?
So this is one that we're looking at for our clients on an annual basis. And I believe there's 2 parts to this. There's a logical part and an emotional part. The emotional part, it's tough not to get involved in what you're seeing happen in the market on a day-to-day basis, right? I mean, I'm sure right now, with the market going up, how do you feel? I feel good. You probably feel good as well, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And then when COVID happened and there's the crash, we all kind of feel a little bit stressed. And so it's trying to get rid of the emotional part and focus on what's logical and right for your plan. And so, in my opinion, how much risk should we have? Let's just take a portfolio and kind of divide it up into 2 parts. We'll call the one part the growth part, how much you would want to have in equities, and then the other part the safe part, having it on the safer side. I like to nickname it the war chest, but you could look at that as bond funds. And in my opinion, right, we always want to have any supplemental income needs on that safer side. And how much? Well, it depends that's where your risk tolerance comes in. So, let's look at the 2008 market crash, 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, just to get back up to even. And so I always like to have, that 5 years of supplemental income needs on that safer side of the portfolio. Now, if you're more aggressive, maybe you say, I only want 3 years over there. If you're a little bit more conservative, maybe put 7 years or 10 years over there. But have a logical approach to it first, and then, take the emotions to go, okay, I'm a little bit more aggressive or a little bit more conservative. But then the remainder of your funds you could have on the growth side of your portfolio and equities. Yep, you're going to see ups and you're going to see downs, but you have to focus that, hey, that's our long-term money. So we should be fine-tuning this, I would say, on an annual basis, just by looking at what do we have coming up in the next 3 to 5 years if we have income that we're going to need over those next 3 to 5 years, do we have that on the safer side of our portfolio?
Well, good stuff, Scott, and you did a good job of kind of breaking this all down for us. But these are all some areas. I'm sure there's more beyond this, but these are 4 key areas where people get out of tune quite often financially. If you're not consistently checking up, not working with your advisor on a regular basis, and this can get out of whack, and you want to get ahead of it before it does, because as I guess with everything, Scott, the earlier you get on top of it, the easier it is to correct.
Absolutely. It's communication, being on top of it, constantly thinking about life-changing events, and does this life-changing event potentially change my overall plan? If so, I want to sit down, think about it, and make the necessary changes before it comes too late.
All right, very good. If you want to get in touch with Scott, you can do so by visiting the website, lifemoneyshow.com, or you can call him at 847-235-6989. I've got a question for you, Scott, that came into the show I want to throw at you before we close things out. This person wrote in and said, I recently received an inheritance, so what should I do with it?
Well, great question that's been brought into us here. I would say first and foremost, ask your advisor if there's any immediate decisions that you need to make. And if not, really just, take some time for yourself, right? Because when stuff like this happens, there can always be a lot of emotions that are taking place. And rather than just make some emotional decisions, I think it's important to take some time for yourself just to kind of let everything, settle down. And then after that, I would kind of look at it in maybe 3 ways. 1, are there any debts that you need to pay off, right? So if you have any depreciating debts, things that are working against you in your financial life, maybe it's a good time to pay off those debts. Second, we talked about it earlier, right, Ben? The cash reserves. And I find, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the cash reserves built up that maybe they should. And so, if you're receiving an inheritance, now's a really good time to, bump up those cash reserves to what you need in the bank. And then the third thing I would look at is your retirement picture okay? And if it's not, then, after you've gotten through step 1 and step 2, maybe you need to save this money for your own retirement just to make sure that you're going to be on track and you can live the lifestyle that you want and so choose to live someday. Now, if your retirement picture is okay, well then maybe now's the time to, maybe there's some emotional connection to this money and a tie to that person that you want to go spend it in a certain way, or maybe you do want to, save some of it still so that way it's built up for your future. But, I think really taking the time and then sitting down, going through these 3 steps that we've just lined out should really help you put a good plan towards what you've received from an inheritance.
Very good. Then you want to make sure you use that, take advantage of that opportunity you have in front of you. But thank you for the question. I do appreciate it. If you do want to follow up with Scott, best way to do so is via the website, lifemoneyshow.com. We'll put the podcast up there. You'll find all of our episodes there as well. But wherever you listen, please hit subscribe on the show. We would appreciate that. That helps us continue to grow as well and help to continue to educate people, which is what we always hope to do. All right, Scott, I'm going to be paying a little more attention to the TV and the commercials as I'm watching this weekend and see if I'm actually paying close attention to what's out there.
Same here. Now I'm wondering how many of them are targeted towards me.
You would probably be scared to find out that information. I would
Yep.
Well, have a good one, Scott. Take care. We'll talk to you again soon.
Great conversation. Thank you.
Sierens Financial Group is an independent financial services firm that utilizes a variety of investment and insurance products. Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AE Wealth Management and Sierens Financial Group, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Sierens Financial Group, Inc. is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein, provided by third parties, have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Sierens Financial Group, Inc.